Hi, I'm Lee. Welcome to the channel. I hope you're having a lovely day. I'm a short, overweight, middle-aged white dude. I've got thinning brown hair, black glasses, I'm wearing a grey t-shirt, beigey trousers, and I'm sitting here at NHP, which we'll explain in a little bit, and I'm joined by Rob, who is the head of marketing for Chargefox. So Rob, thank you very much for joining me and coming to have a chat.
It's an absolute pleasure, Lee.
And so we've had some chats back and forth and so on, but I thought what we could start with is, can you explain to me how Chargefox business model works?
Yeah, absolutely. So Chargefox is a platform that provides services to aggregate EV charging around Australia. And we do that by providing services to charger owners, who we call hosts, to enable them to manage those charges, to get alerts when they go offline, when they have issues, and also provide the app that I'm sure you use yourself to find those 1,500 plus public chargers around Australia, to drive up to them, navigate, plug in and charge.
Cool. Now, I have been somewhat unkind to you in the past from time to time, just in terms of there's been occasions where I've gotten to a Chargefox charger and something's not quite working and so on. I will though say the times that I have called your support line, they've been really good, so that's great. Would it be so? To put it into my own words, you guys, like your team basically looks after the back end and the payment side of things so that the customers, the hosts, are able to pay for their charging, but you don't necessarily own or manage the actual physical hardware chargers. Is that?
Yeah, that's correct. A simple analogy is an Airbnb or Uber type model. So Airbnb don't own the holiday homes, the private citizens own the holiday homes, and Airbnb make it possible for you to locate and check out those charges and then to pay and do that with trust and all those types of things. So that's probably a simple example. But yeah, we don't own charging. We leave that to all the businesses around Australia, the organisations, the tourist destinations, the hotels, etc. And what that enables us to do is to have by far the largest network, and it means that we have an open and universal network because we want people to install as many chargers as possible and make them available to the public, because it's going to take more than one organisation in Australia to provide enough EV charging for everyone in all sort of corners of this amazing wide brown land that we all live in. And it's great that there's a lot of organisations doing that. We need more, but what we want is we want Chargefox to be the platform that you can go to and reliably find all those chargers. And that's why we work with large businesses, small businesses, bed and breakfasts, cafes, big multinationals, but you can find all those chargers on the Chargefox app.
And I suppose the challenge then, and this comes from a previous video that I did where I was talking about range anxiety, and it wasn't really a thing, and most people said, we don't have range anxiety, we have charger anxiety. And I suppose the challenge of your model is you're sort of like the public face, but you can't physically fix if a charger's down and so on. Like, you can contact the people and say, hey, that charger that we managed for you is down, can you please fix it? But so how in the past and sort of how going forward are you able to, what can you do to improve that?
It's a really good question. So what we're able to do on the kind of soft side is we foster our relationships really, really closely. We hold them dearly with our hosts so that they know who we are and we know who they are. And ideally, we're also encouraging them to have really robust maintenance programs, make sure that they value that charger experience that they provide. They understand it's a reflection of their business, but also we totally appreciate that we're the payment gateway, and it's understandable that when a person arrives at one of the chargers with a Chargefox sticker on it and they're interacting with the Chargefox sticker through the app or through their vehicle in-dash system, if there's an issue with that charger, they're going to have challenges that are presented to us, and we don't shy away from that. And we're putting in place a number of different practices and systems at the moment to improve that situation. To contrast where we are now compared to perhaps where we've been in the recent past, because EV charging doesn't have a long past, is that the Chargefox business has been singularly focused on getting as many chargers as we possibly can out into the public, because as EV drivers, that's what we need. We have needed more chargers, more chargers, more chargers. And because of the model that I explained earlier, it means that it's not just us, one company, installing chargers as fast as we possibly can and kind of trickling them out, is that we're able to bring the might of all these different businesses together to deploy those chargers. And what we've wanted to do is attract as many businesses and organisations as possible to the idea of having EV chargers available to the public. And to do that, we wanted to introduce as few impediments as possible. So that's like, we don't want to give them a rigid, massive amount of rules and laws and requirements and all these sort of punitive measures, because that would discourage them from deploying chargers. Now, the EV landscape in charging has changed. It's become something that's been only kind of the purview of early adopters and people that are willing to kind of accept the fact that they are early adopters, and now it's something that everyone's relying on. And transport is a necessary convenience that we need. And if you drive an EV, you need reliable charging. So our focus is still on deploying as many chargers as we possibly can, but now we absolutely accept that we need to introduce things like SLAs and maintenance agreements.
What's an SLA?
Oh, sorry. Yep, jargon is a service level agreement. So in loose terms, that will be introducing, I guess, a rule book or a series of guidelines that we expect from our charger hosts that sort of say, this is what you need to do in order to be a good charging provider. And that's a really, I guess, simple summary, and it's a bit of a quid pro quo, because until recently, there have been a lot of free charging. I know the pros and cons of free charging has very much been in the media currently. But the fact of the matter is, if an organisation isn't earning a revenue stream from their charging, they're less likely to either want to or be able to maintain that. Whereas if they're getting a return from it, then they're more likely to action that outage a lot faster. From our perspective, when a charger goes down, if they're on the Chargefox platform, the owner of that charger is notified immediately or automatically. And if they have a maintenance provider, that maintenance provider is notified automatically and immediately. So the wheels can start turning in order to get that error fixed.
I mean, a couple of things that you mentioned there. I suppose, you know, the service level agreements, things like it. It was funny, as you mentioned. You know, you encourage people to have them up and running. I encourage my 8-year-old not to use the skateboard down the hall.
Yeah.
He's only going to stop doing it when I take the skateboard away. So,
Yes.
but we don't want we don't want the charges to go away. So I appreciate the challenge you have there. I suppose the next thing that I was going to ask is something around the lines of. Something I don't understand sometimes is, and I suppose it comes down to whether it's free or paid for charging, is I almost look at it sometimes like I go to a location where there's a charger, and it seems, from what I understand, it's that location that's installed the charger. Wouldn't they want to have it up and running? Like and I can only sort of speak from a user's point of view. Yeah. Like, I can understand if the free charger that my council has installed up the road from me is down for a couple of weeks. It's not a priority for the council. It's very frustrating for me, but I understand where that's coming from. But and I'll give you a perfect example. Like the chargers along the Hume between Melbourne and Sydney, which is the ones I'm most familiar with. Goulburn is up and down every now and again, and Gundagai is sort of up and down now and again. I suppose the challenge is, it seems like the more they get used, the more often they go down. And explain, please.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and I think those more regional type chargers are often the ones that are highlighted, because they're the types of chargers that you might not use very frequently, but when you need to use them, you need to use them, because you don't have the opportunity to use the dozen or so other chargers that are within proximity of that as you might in a metropolitan area. So that is a challenge, but they are also used really, really heavily during those peak periods. And the good news is that we're fostering closer and closer relationships with manufacturers of charging infrastructure, such as NHP, where we are today, and Tritium and a bunch of other manufacturers, which has been great because their win is our win. As an industry, as a sector, as an EV charging cohort of people, we all want this to work, and we need to work closely together to do that. But going back to the previous point, there are a lot of moving parts in this. So when something goes offline or something is damaged, or it's vandalized or whatever the case may be, and it needs to be repaired, there are a series of steps that we need to go through to get those parts, and we've been impacted by supply chain and all these same things which everyone's been affected by, particularly in the last couple of years. But in terms of those charges, we've got a real focus on those at the moment in making sure that they're brought back online, that those relationships with those OEM partners, the equipment manufacturers, the people that actually manufacture the hardware, and those that own it, that we're working much, much closer together, because we all appreciate, most of us are EV drivers, we all appreciate that this is something that needs to be reliable. I would encourage users to always check the app. If they are going to rely on a charger and they are going to travel on a certain route, before they go on that route, do check that it's available, that it's operational, because the Chargefox app will notify you straight away, as will most of the other apps.
And I will say that has been, it's funny. So when I first started driving around in an EV, I used PlugShare a lot. But the thing is, with PlugShare, you're kind of reliant on the people who are checking in. For those who don't know, PlugShare is an app where you can see people will check in if they're using the charger. But the challenge there is people need to remember to check in, and I'm guilty myself that I'll plug in and I'll forget to check in. Whereas on the Chargefox app, if it is a Chargefox charger, it'll show if the charger is in use. So that's definitely a really good hint for anyone who's watching. If you know that you're going to a Chargefox charger, check the Chargefox app to see if it's in use. You know what would be, and again, I know this is technical, so it's always easy to go, just make it happen, but it's hard to build things in the background. But could you update the app in a way where it doesn't just show that the charge is being used, but it shows how long it's been used for? So like if I know I'm 10 minutes away from a super fast charger and the person who's plugged in there is at 90% or has been there for 40 minutes, I know, oh look, they're probably not going to be there much longer. So by the time I get there, either they'll be done or I won't have to wait too long. Is that technically possible?
Perhaps. As always, the truth behind that is probably more complex and too arduous for this type of forum, because we've also looked at things like, could we have some type of queuing functionality within the app? The reality is that, as most of us who are EV drivers know, is that the length of charge is a really rubbery amount of time. It depends on, are you going to go to 100%? Are you going to go to 80%? Is it cold? Is it hot? How long have you been there?
Where is the moon in relation to the Earth?
Yes. Are you going to leave immediately after? And we might talk about idle fees later, but are you going to leave immediately after? So do you want to get told on the app that, oh yeah, the guy who's in the charger now is 90%, and you then rely on that charger, and then you get there and God forbid he's gone ballooning, like that example that we've all heard about, and then that sort of 10-minute wait that you thought you were going to have, you're now stuck there for 5 or 6 hours. Like, I don't disagree with the idea. I think that, but as it's a new sector, and it is still a new sector, we're still trying to work out like what's the best approach.
There's a lot of variables where we could do this, but then this could go wrong, and then this could, it's. So now, just going back a couple of steps. So you mentioned the service level agreement thing. Like, can you give me any insight, like concrete? These are some of the things that we're thinking of putting in there, and these are the timeframes, either timeframes that we're giving to our service providers, or can you give me a time frame about when you can give me a time frame?
Yeah, absolutely. So transparency, I think, is the first step for us, and as a leadership team at Chargefox, we're very focused to begin with on sharing with our drivers and the public and our stakeholders what our metrics are like at the moment. So that's going to be metrics right across the company, but particularly around reliability. So what percentage of our charges are up, or the charges that are on our network are up, so that we can start getting a benchmark that everyone knows about where the Chargefox network is at in terms of reliability in an objective way. The reality is we facilitate tens of thousands of charges every month on our network, and the vast majority of those go ahead fine.
But mine doesn't, and I'm grumpy about it.
Exactly, and I don't want to discount or devalue that, because it can be a significant inconvenience, but we do have 90,000 drivers using our app. It's about 95% of the EV driving public in Australia, across 5,000 plugs, and they're plugging in more than once every 30 seconds and doing a charge. So there's a lot of charging happening, but that is by no means us shying away from the fact that not 100% is right. Until we get to 100%, we need to keep improving. So those metrics around our reliability will commence from next month.
So we're in July now, so
yes,
it'll start in August 2023?
Yep. At the moment, we're doing a lot of work around, this is probably the boring but important part, is how do we measure reliability? So without going into the details too much, if we have a charge station that has 8 plugs, if one plug is operational, is that considered to be online or not?
Not if it's a Chad mode.
Yeah, well, exactly. So once again, I don't want to go into boring details, but we want to make sure that we're transparent about how we're reporting on reliability, but that we're doing it in such a way that it is kind of reasonably reflective of what you expect. Because exactly, I don't want us to say, yes, we're 100% reliable because we had one CHAdeMO plug available, because that's not going to cater the vast majority of the audience. But once again, transparency. We will talk about how we measure our reliability, and we'll report on that, and we'll report on that on a monthly basis.
Cool. And do you know yet where we'll be able to, will that be on your website, in the app?
It'll be on our website. You'll hear from me on socials. Cool. You can get in touch with me personally. I'm sure you and I will have chats in the future. There's other influencers.
You've given me your number. That's a big mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, you can call me anytime and I'm sure I'll block it. No, I'm joking.
Second biggest mistake. Cool. So next one is, and this, I mean, this is sort of on the same topic. We've talked about reliability, but in terms of, I want to see if your thinking may have changed a little bit, because what the public, or at least me as one of the public, has heard a lot about is we're pushing out we're pushing out X amount of hundreds of chargers, pushing out X amount of thousands of chargers, and there is that tipping point where it's like, cool, look, we've got a lot of chargers now. It'll never be enough, but we've got a lot now. Can we now put a little bit more focus on the reliability side, the management side of it, rather than just we've chucked them out there, and we're focusing on chucking them out there as opposed to getting them up and running? Has that changed a little, or has your thinking changed a little bit, or have you noticed a change? Or
I don't think it's changed, and the reason I say that is because of our business model is that we're not choosing the location of chargers. So we're really fortunate that we get a lot of inbound inquiries from businesses that we either already deal with that want to install more chargers, or new businesses, new organisations that want to sort of get on the journey of installing EV charging. So we get far more than we can deal with, which is a really great problem to have. And we do have to kind of pick and choose which ones we can facilitate, but we don't choose where to install a charger. It's a really common question we get, like, oh, my local supermarket doesn't have charging, can you install charging there? And we have to explain that we don't do that, but we're more than happy to work with your local business association or a real estate owner or whomever it is to help them along that journey. So
part of but you can make suggestions.
Oh, we can, and this is where the rub is, I guess, is that, and we talk about this a lot internally, is how much do we just focus our efforts on trying to get as many charges out as possible and not pick and choose, or do we look at certain sort of charging deserts, I think they've been called in the past, and sort of look at how we start filling gaps in our network? Now, we haven't, I think we're still at the stage where we're looking to get as many charges out as possible, and installing chargers is an amazingly complex process. It is really, really difficult. The infrastructure behind that cable that goes into your car, particularly in the case of high voltage chargers, DC chargers, it's beyond my comprehension.
I was chatting to some of the folks here at NHP, because that's sort of what they do here. They build chargers, and yeah, my head got hurt. My head got sore, because yeah, there's a lot in it.
Yeah, and the reality is we're relying on a power grid that really hasn't changed in 100 years. Some of the pieces of equipment that are getting power to your home, to charge your laptop, now to charge your car, to keep your phone running, to keep your fridge cold, all those types of things, a lot of those, not the technology, I'm talking about the actual pieces of equipment, they've been in circulation for 100 years, and now we're plugging these hyper modern computers
types, not the actual units. Surely they've been replaced.
No, there are many. You can look at examples from that have been in market for 50, 60, 70, 80 years, the same transformers, those types of things. So the power poles, the infrastructure, like we're still in a lot of cases burning old dinosaurs to make steam, to make a turbine go so that we can get power to charge our cars. So without sort of going into my energy nerd background, is that we're relying on this system, and we're kind of building all this extra expectation on top of it. So when someone says, oh, just install more chargers in this location, totally agree that needs to happen. Charging needs to be everywhere. It needs to be ubiquitous. It needs to be in every shopping center, every sporting ground, every car park. It absolutely needs to be there, and we will get there. But it's not just a matter of plugging in, your laptop charger. It's sometimes a little bit more complex than that. So to go back to your question, because I know I'm skirting around it, is I think at the moment we're still focused on getting as many chargers as possible into market rather than picking particular locations. However, because of our role, we're able to work with other organisations who are doing exactly that. So a really great example is the WA EV network. So our West Coast brethren over there in WA, amazing project. I believe it's the longest EV charging highway in the world, and it's somewhere just shy of 5,000 kilometres. It will be linked by DC fast chargers between Esperance and, my WA geography is a bit problematic, but I think it's Kununurra.
I'll take your word for it.
I believe that's right. I hope so. Apologies to my WA EV network friends if I get that wrong. But that's going to be 98 chargers that are available in some of Australia's most isolated locations, and they're all on Chargefox network, which is great. But it's those organisations and those groups, and that's backed by a number of organisations in WA who are making sure that critical infrastructure is available.
I suppose I think maybe you may have misunderstood my question a little bit. So I get that in terms of locations, but I mean just in terms of like how the location set. I'll give you an example. So the Marambina Bowls Club, where I charge from time to time, the chargers are in the parking lot, but they're like in the nicest spot of the parking lot, right by the entrance, where like 20 meters that way is the end of the parking lot. It probably far less chance of being iced just if the chargers were like, we don't have to be right by the door. So just little things like that, where if someone's installing a net, we go, oh great, cool, we're happy to support you. Here's a page of 10 points of these are things that seem to work well when you physically don't put them there, put them there. Is that something that you're thinking about?
Yeah,
you have?
So we don't have a lot of control over that. It's very much controlled by the person who's going to own the car park. Shopping centres are a really, really great example. But also the way that as EV driving becomes more ubiquitous, it means that more of the clientele that are going to that destination, the bowls club, the shopping centre, they're more likely to be EV drivers, which means that the location is able to cater more directly to them. And I think we've even seen in the last couple of years where EV charging has often been behind the dumpster at the back in the sketchy area with the bad drainage, because it's like, oh, well, we'll install EV charging, we'll see how popular it is.
We don't want it to get in the way.
And we don't have to get in the way. And parking's at a premium. Like if you've ever tried to park at your local shopping centre on a Saturday morning, particularly with screaming kids or whatever, it's a challenge. I was at Northland just the other day and we got there at a time that I didn't think there'd be anyone there. There's a lot of people there. So do organisations want to monopolise 6, 8, 10 car parks for EV drivers when we are still a very small portion of the driving public? We're at 10% of new vehicles purchased, but when you look at the stock of cars that are already out in Australian roads, we're a tiny portion.
Although, and we sort of talked a little bit about this yesterday when we were talking on the phone, and this isn't really a question, I'm trying to make a point, is that I would counter that a little bit with the fact that it's almost like a particular retailer that we were talking about, where the advantage to a shopping centre, for example, of having EV chargers is that unfortunately at the moment, EVs are expensive. And so if you can afford an EV, you're in a certain demographic of spenders, and you're more likely to spend a little bit more money at that shopping centre, and particularly because it takes a while to charge, you're going to be there longer. So that's sort of how I would sell charging spots to a shopping centre, for example, or any sort of retail location where in terms of you're not giving up parking spots, like people are going to park there anyway, but you're specifically bringing in a particular type of demographic to park there. And at the moment, that demographic is one that can afford an electric car, which is pricey. So that's sort of the point that I would make. On to the next one. So now this, I don't know if I want to know this, but I thought it's worth asking. One of the things that a lot of people say, a lot of naysayers about electric cars go, well, there's no point in getting an electric car because the electricity that you're getting from it comes from a coal power plant anyway. That is slowly getting better, where there's more renewables in the system and that kind of stuff. Is that something that you've thought about showing? And I suppose it would be difficult because sometimes a charger might be using renewables and sometimes it's not, and that kind of thing. On the one hand, it'd be really complicated. On the other hand, I don't think I want to know just yet because I don't think I'd like the answer. But thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point, and it's definitely a point of deep conversation within Chargefox. Because of our model and the fact that we don't own the chargers, we also don't control the energy supply that's going in. So some of our contemporaries within our industry, most of them, they own their chargers, so they're very much able to say, we want 100% green power going into there, and they're able to say that they provide 100% green charging, which is fantastic. We don't have that option because we can't mandate to a host that you must provide green power. Some do. Some have got like on-site solar, they've got all the bells and whistles of sustainability, which is fantastic. Some and others don't. And for us to be able to, I guess, calculate that or audit it in some way, it'd be out of date before it was done. However, what we do have is a lot of data, which is really, really great, and it puts us in a situation where we can calculate the amount of emissions that are coming from each charge, because there's this thing called an emissions factor. Every state in Australia has it. It essentially means the amount of pollution that's generated for every kilowatt hour of energy that's used. And that's mandated by the government, or it's released and updated by the government. So we know where people charge and we know how much they charge, so we can calculate their impact. So that's point one, which is great. We're able to offer to our fleet drivers at the moment and our business customers a way to, I guess, offset or account for that with a renewable energy host, because we've got that reporting capability. and we are investigating ways for making that an option for individual drivers. So for fleets and large businesses, that's an option now, and we're looking to make that an option for individual drivers. Your next question is going to be when. I don't know when that's going to be just yet.
Now, so I noticed this when I was, and again, this is one of those things where it's a lot of things to glue together and get to work together. I recently did an overview of the Polestar 2, and that's got Google Android Auto thingy in it, and so you can download apps from the App Store, but it's limited. Like, you can't download every app from the Android store. Chargefox wasn't in the list of apps that you could do. Is there? I don't know whether it's you have to talk to them, or they have to talk to you, or you have to talk to each other, but I think, like, something like going back to what we were talking earlier, in the sense of if I'm driving to a charger and I want to check if that charger is being used or not, what's going on in terms of what you can do with integration with each individual car manufacturers, so that I don't have to check the app, the car will check the app for me?
It's a really good question, and I'm so glad you asked it, because my product team are going to be excited that I'm able to talk about this. Ooh. And this isn't a plant, so he's asked this question organically and of his own free will.
It's in my notes.
That's for you, Nick, and John, and the rest of the team. So as a software business, we want to be a platform business moving forward. So we don't, as I said a number of times, we don't own the chargers, and we want Chargefox, I guess, to be the one-stop shop for all charging. So all of our organizations that are within our industry that are, I guess, competing against us, we don't see them as competitors because we don't own chargers. We see a bright future where everyone...
Can I just call... So you don't own any of the chargers?
So we, the motoring clubs and us, we're owned by the motoring clubs, so RACV, RAA, RACT, NRMA. I'll get in trouble if I don't name them all.
RAA?
RAA. I think that's all of them.
Did the Q one, the Queensland one?
RACQ. I think that's all of them. I apologise. I've been caught up in that before.
Should we just go A, B, C, D, E, F, just go through the
all
alphabet?
the motoring clubs around Australia, they own us through Australian Motoring Services, and together we own some chargers. But Chargefox own very, very few chargers independently ourselves.
I just want to ask that because I know some people in the comments will be like, well, technically.
Yeah. So the clubs own the chargers and the clubs own us.
Okay.
So I guess in a way we own some chargers, but it's not.
But you don't have direct control over
Chargefox does not have direct involvement in those. So in terms of the platform, so until now, Chargefox, the way you interact with Chargefox has been the app that's on your phone just there, but we're very much moving into a platform business where we'll be in the heads-up displays of vehicles, so you won't have to use the app. We're working with some vehicle manufacturers at the moment, which I can't name, but some great vehicle manufacturers to have those conversations that you mentioned and putting in place the systems right now. And I think that they're the first vehicles or the first brands towards the end of this year will have Chargefox experience fully integrated into their infotainment systems.
Cool.
And then hopefully that will be the first of many that will fall after that. And we're trying to build that, as I understand it, in a way that it can be deployed across various different manufacturers, because we don't want to just be in the app. We want to be a fully integrated service offering, so that you're not restricted to your phone. You can use Google Maps, you can use your heads-up display, you can use your RFID card. However you want to interact, you can interact in that way.
And also, I will mention, for those who aren't aware, definitely go and order an RFID card from Chargefox.
Yeah, go on our website to do that.
It's free.
Yep, it is free.
I mentioned that. I actually just ordered a second one because I've got one that just lives in my car. For those who don't understand, so how the RFID card works is if you get to a charger and you don't have cell signal, your cell phone, whatever, you can't use the app for whatever reason, most, if not all, chargers.
I believe it's all.
We're fairly confident. All.
Yep.
It's a little tap thing, so it looks like a little credit card, and you just tap it on the thing, and you can activate the charger that way. So worst comes to worst, you can always activate the charger with the RFID card.
It's great for remote chargers that don't have great signal, as you mentioned, but also some multi-level and underground car parks have patchy signal sometimes.
Chadson, I'm looking at you.
So,
although Chadson has put in a Wi-Fi thing, so you can get Wi-Fi right by the chargers now, so that's really good.
Good.
The reason why I ordered the second one is because now I'm fancy and I review cars. So
yeah,
I've got my review RFID card.
Don't forget your friends when you get really famous.
I have no friends. Cool. I mean, look, I think. Oh wait, I can't not mention this. When are we getting a roof over every charger?
Oh, it's such a great question. A question we get all the time. And we often talk about the service station experience, the gas the petrol, the diesel fill-up experience. It's something that's been honed over 100 years, and we have all those conveniences. We have toilets, you have shelter, you have you can refuse 2 Mentos for $3 or whatever they are.
Negotiable.
Yeah, if you're really desperate. And EV charging doesn't have that. And the boring but correct answer is putting roofs over those things, they cost money, which means that charging is going to be more expensive. So it is happening in some limited locations, particularly in other markets in North America and Europe. But any further investment in charging is going to lead to higher prices. And that's just something we need to be cognizant of.
Yeah, no such thing as a free lunch.
Correct.
Okay, but yeah, you just put a suggestion of, if you've got a spare few $1,000s, yeah, just put a roof on. Just hand out umbrellas, just something.
Yeah. I think shopping centre car parks already have roofs, which is great. And anytime I think that you can include charging infrastructure in a location that already has those amenities, we talk about shopping centres a lot because it's the easy one that a lot of people are familiar with, is that they do have toilets, they do have shelter, they do have cinemas if you want to go to the movies. They've got all of those types of things. So
don't go to the cinema if your car's on 80% and then you leave it full there while other people need to charge.
Oh yeah, we should talk about idle fees as well.
Now that you've said that. Idle fees.
Yeah, great one. So that's one thing that's getting a lot of attention at the moment from both drivers and the media alike. So we've just recently started off a trial on some charges with our friends in WA EV Network. It's the second time we've talked about them today. And essentially the way that works is through our app, you'll be notified when your car is almost fully charged. And once your car is fully charged, you get what's called a 10-minute grace period. And that gives you time to get back to your car. Although you can always see your state of charge on the app, and you can always see how much time you can expect before the charge is full.
No, I was just having a thing about just on a technical level, because what if someone, I can't remember, but I presume when you install the Chargefox app, the little thing comes up and goes, do you want to activate notifications? And just by default, I always say no.
Yeah.
Maybe if they've plugged into I don't know if you could do this on a technical level, but if they've turned notifications off, just sort of go, hey, for idle fees, could you please turn notifications on? Because they might get idle fees, but they're not looking at their phone, and they've turned notifications off for the app. So there might be a technical challenge there.
So what we've done is we've gone a high-tech and a low-tech way to introduce these idle fees. So when you get to a site that has idle fees applicable, which I must stress is only a few sites in WA to begin with while we're trialling it and making sure that it works best for everybody. And the goal is to make as much charging available to as many people as possible. That's what we're introducing these for with our friends on the WA EV network. So just to finish up, once your car's fully charged, you've then got 10 minutes to unplug your car and vacate. Otherwise, you'll begin getting charged a fee, which is $1 a minute. And that's to incentivize people to leave, to let the next person come in and charge. So in terms of your question, so you're notified on the app if you have turned your notifications off. We also have very, very ample signage, I should say, at the sites. Even on the plug handles themselves, there's a big white tag that comes out that says idle fees are applicable. So I would say that if you have the cognitive abilities to drive a car, you will be very, very sure that idle fees are applicable at those sites.
I look forward. Now, any timeline in terms of how long that trial is going to last and when you're going to make a decision on this didn't work?
Yeah, another really good question. So once again, coming back to the whole model of we don't own the chargers, at the moment we are investigating how we would deploy this as an option for hosts, because at the end of the day, it has to be in their interest to own the chargers for them to introduce idle fees. Now, me personally, as Rob, not as a Chargefox representative, I can't see why you wouldn't want to do that, because you want to have as many people charging as you can, both for convenience, for customer satisfaction, and for revenue as well, to be frank. So, but it will be up to the hosts, and we're just investigating from a system perspective how we facilitate that. I don't have a timeline on it, and I know that there are a lot of people out there in the public who are like, get this going now, we want idle fees everywhere. I totally appreciate that. We need to make sure that we are doing it right, and we're doing it in such a way that it achieves the results that we all need without being unfairly punitive in situations that we're not really aware of just yet.
So on idle fee, another thing that another charging provider does, we won't name any names, what they do during busy times like school holidays, things like that, they actually limit the charges to 80%. So once your car gets to 80%, you start getting charged idle fees. Now, again, this is just my it's funny, when I first experienced this when I was in New Zealand, and I was like, oh, this is bloody annoying and blah, blah, blah. But then when I actually stopped and thought about it, when you're on a long drive, and I try to do this a lot on my channel, try and educate people, where it's like, if you're on a long drive, charge to 80 and move on, because that 80 to 20, 80 to 100%, you're wasting your time. The battery charging slows down so much, you're much better to get to 80 and move on. So once you kind of make that understanding, quite frankly, forcing people to move on once they've hit 80% during busy periods, that does make sense to me. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I probably can't speak to that. At the moment, the trial is very much focused on the full charge.
Yeah.
And I think to kind of empathize with people at different stages of their EV journey is, I'm a relatively recent EV driver, but I know when I started, that extra 20% you get from 80 to 100, like you feel like you need that, right? Like if you're going outside of your comfort zone on a road trip, like 20% feels like a lot. But I appreciate it takes a really long time to do that, and it's probably not being the best friend to the EV driver behind you. But I don't know if it's for us to say right now as a business, or I don't think we're in a position to say right now what's going to be best. But I think what's important for us to communicate is we've got about 30 or 40 software engineers that are based right here in Australia that are investigating this, modeling this every day, and we're working really closely with great partners, the hosts that are wanting to provide a great charging experience. Another one is in Adelaide, we're doing some really great trials around flexible pricing to maximize the amount of usage during peak renewable periods as opposed to fossil fuel periods. So when there's more sunshine, energy is more sustainable, energy is cheaper. We want to incentivize people to get in there and charge their car, and vice versa. We're looking at disincentivizing that. So Adelaide have been a really great partner in doing that. So we're experimenting in a lot of ways with idle fees, with flexible pricing, with incentives and disincentives for particular behaviours. We're learning a lot from overseas, but Australia's its own market. But we're finding some really good findings, and all of that will eventually kind of boil down to hopefully the best practice being rolled out right across the country.
I thought of something else, just to go back a little bit to the DC highway to WA. Are there going to be spare parts along the way at each location, just in case? Because particularly on that drive, like if you get, sorry, I'm a little bit all over the place, but something else that I thought about ages ago, and again, it may not be practical, but you don't control the charges, but one of those suggestions you could make is at DC chargers, maybe I should just suggest this to HP. At DC chargers, it'd be really awesome if there was just a wall plug next to each DC charger, so that worst comes to worst, you get there and the DC charger's down, you can at least trickle charge. Look, you're going to sit there longer, but at least there's some power there to get you somewhere. And particularly like if you're driving to WA and there's nothing,
something's better than nothing.
There's nothing for 300 kilometers around.
Yeah, I think that's another really good question. I'm sure the guys from NHP are probably excited to hear that too, because I was here just last week and they showed us some new tech that's coming out, which essentially facilitates a more flexible charging experience. I'm probably not doing this justice, but one of the big points of conversation is like a CHAdeMO plug. So are we going to install a CHAdeMO plug which is used by 5% or less of the EV driving public, or would it be better off having a CCS2 plug, which is no jargon, which is the plug that most cars use? As a Chargefox platform, we want to make sure that charging is available to all manufacturers, all models. But there's an argument to be made that you need a more flexible experience, or you need a backup 3-prong plug so that you can have that optionality. And there are manufacturers, and these guys are one of them, who are looking into that, as are, I'm sure, all the other manufacturers as well.
Okay. Well, Rob, thank you so much for coming in and having a chat. Is there anything else I should have asked you, or anything else you'd like to talk about?
Oh no, I'm EV charging. We live and breathe it, so we love this. We're going to run out of
ironically, we're going to run out of battery, but we could talk forever.
Yeah, we absolutely could.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for NHP for hosting us. Really appreciate it. It's a lovely space, and it was on very short notice. We may have emailed them yesterday about this, so we're very professional here at Not a Car Guy. Rob, thank you so much. Maybe we'll do this again in about 6 months' time and see where things are.
It'd be an absolute pleasure. I can't wait.
Cool. Well, if you have found this useful, if you have found this helpful, please like and subscribe. Apparently there's a bell thing that you click on, which does good things for me, I'm told. If you have already subscribed, thank you so much for your support, and we'll catch you on the next one. Safe and happy driving. By my standards, that was very organised.
Good.
We stayed on mostly on focus, and yeah, I think
The mics were on.
I hope so. Cool. funny little story. So I did an interview for my channel with Zoe Daniel, the teal MP.
Oh yes, yep.
You see how that button's red because it's recording?
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't push that button.
Oh, yep, right.
Voiceoverly here to point out that if you watch, and in my defense, I noticed this when we were filming, but I didn't want to stop the recording just because I realized I was getting shorter. The chair that I was on, something went wrong with it, and as the recording kept going and going, the chair kept dropping and dropping and dropping. And if you watch this shot, you'll see that I'm getting lower and lower and lower throughout the shot. So there was that too.